I am making this video to present the idea that Trump and Maga are swimming in karma, which means that there's always some negative emotion within that he's forced to deal with it. He cannot escape his negative emotions. This is what he suffers from. Within, he feels limited. Within, he feels trapped. Within, there's a cognitive dissonance of thinking that he should be the greatest by having to suffer the reality of realizing he's probably going to go down as one of the worst. And this is despite these constant grandiose claims I'm sure he espouses to himself and obviously espouses to others as far as where he should be ranked on the ladder of presidents and leaders. Reality as a whole is a constant, painful contradiction to him. And in countless ways, this is the same for Maga. Now, why would this be the same for Maga? Well, think about it. Despite everything with this immigration crackdown, they still are probably dealing with the same people on the streets, the same people when they go to the Home Depots. There's not going to be a day alive where when they go out and about, they're not going to see a Hispanic man or woman or family at their Walmart, down the street, at a restaurant. They're not going anywhere. Immigrants are not going anywhere. But what happens is, because of these negative emotions, because of this darkness that Trump and MAGA feel within, there's a need to express that. There's a need to, on an unconscious level, they want to get rid of it. But how does this manifest? This manifests in them espousing and or trying to enact negative laws or bring about a dark type of change. And this is to satisfy some need within. I'm talking about Trump and MAGA that can never get satisfied. What happens if they manage to get anything enacted that's dark and negative and messed up, such as the ICE raids, for example? It doesn't ever really satisfy the need. They move from one thing to the next. Because understand, everybody lives in their own individual worlds. That's what it is internally. So a person dealing with karma isn't simply what goes around comes around. This also is connected to, or you could say described as, what they are experiencing minute to minute within. In fact, I would say that's the truest definition of karma, what one is carrying with them. And the fact is, the darkness, the coldness, the lack of compassion, the cruelty, all of these negative, limited emotions are emotions that Trump and MAGA carry within them 24/7. See, Trump's personal experience, minute to minute, day to day, week to week, must be one of confusion, because within his mind, brought up these grandiose ideas of what a leader he is, what a great leader he is, what a great president he is, or at least what a great leader and president he's supposed to be. But what happens is he's constantly and relentlessly butting up against a reality that contradicts that. And at 79 years old, with everything that he's been given, with the $400 million, with all the crimes he's been able to get away with being able to become president of the United States twice, with being able to amass a cult following, there's still this sense of perpetual dissatisfaction, which we see expressed by Trump day to day. Despite having everything, he feels like he has nothing. It just doesn't matter. At 79 years old, despite all his efforts, despite all the negativity, despite all the scams, despite him endlessly being able to successfully avert the law, at least in any criminal sense, still Trump is dissatisfied. Trump is unhappy. And so is MAGA. Because what kind of person would the supporters of MAGA be attracted to? They're going to be attracted to someone that's similar to them, that espouses the same types of values, that believes in the same types of things, that validates them. The thing with being validated for such limited, negative, dark sentiments is this requires a person to be in a constant internal place of suffering. And as I see it, I think most people, whether on the left or right, are on some low level in a perpetual place of suffering. But I contend that with MAGA and with Trump, it's far, far, far more pronounced. You see, no one who's at peace within is going to express themselves the way that Trump and MAGA express themselves. No one who is at peace within is going to vote for and support someone like Trump the way that MAGA votes for and supports someone like Trump. So this is proof of the karma that they're dealing with. That darkness has to come out somehow, and that darkness comes out in the form of the things they say and the people they support, and the blindness that is showcased by these MAGA supporters. Because when it comes to anyone being blind in terms of seeing a thing, where would blindness come from? Where would blindness come from? Blindness is going to come from an eternal space where you're limited. Because blindness is defined by the inability to see. And it doesn't necessarily have to be what you see physically, but it could be what you understand or what you don't understand. And there'll be additional karma down the line, karma that on some levels already being experienced, but will be experienced on a much more mainstream level when Trump and MAGA universally across the board in the media everywhere are seen as nothing but Nazis, where that's just the common conversation. That's the conversation that's everywhere. They're understanding the consensus is that Trump and MAGA were always essentially Nazis, that they helped to usher in fascism in America. Joe Rogan will be part of that too. Anyone who helped MAGA, or I should say Trump, get a second term. There is going to be no escaping that. That's the karma they have to deal with too. You understand, if you think of the long arc of history, everything always heads towards something better. Nothing ever remains the same. You go back long enough, there was slavery, and obviously slavery is not a thing that's accepted anymore. I understand there are certain countries where there's open slave markets. I don't know the details, but in a large part, slavery is not a thing anymore. So at one point it was the most common thing. It was so basic for, slavery to be part of a society. We've come a long way since then. We've come a long way in terms of diseases. We've come a long way in terms of technology. Everything moves forward. Everything moves closer to love. So when a person or group is on the wrong side of history, it ultimately does catch up to them. And it will catch up to Trump, in large part already has, and it will catch up to MAGA. MAGA, as proud as they may seem to talk about Trump now, that's not going to remain. And here's another thing Trump's dealing with in terms of karma, is the constant worry about Jeffrey Epstein. Because Jeffrey Epstein is getting brought up, and it's not just by Democrats, it's by the group it's by the side that started it, that ginned it up into this huge deal, rightfully so, in terms of Jeffrey Epstein and the Jeffrey Epstein client list. So Trump's not going to be able to escape that either, and neither is MAGA. And they could play all the mental gymnastics they want, and Trump can make all the excuses he wants, but neither side will be able to escape the reality that in all likelihood, Trump is on that client list. No one ever really escapes a thing. No one ever really escapes karma. No one ever really gets away with anything. Even if it seems like they are getting away with something, that's never actually the case. You don't know what a person's dealing with internally. You don't know what they're dealing with in their family life. With Trump, we know in terms of his career life. And we do have some idea in terms of his family life. We know him and Melania don't have the best relationship. But you really think Trump is going to have the best relationship with anybody? In order for that to be the case, there has to be something loving enough, open enough, and accepting enough, and patient enough within to have a quality relationship with anybody. But he doesn't have that. Trump is incredibly limited as a human being. This isn't to be said as a criticism as much as just an observation. Because in observation to better describe how Trump would be feeling miserable. Because when you feel limited, when you are unable to, when you don't feel open within, you feel closed down within, that's frightening. That's a scary thing, because if you feel limited within, you essentially just feel like a bag of bones. You don't feel connected to anything greater. And a human being that sees themselves as just a bag of bones, well, they're going to feel pretty powerless in life as a whole. And Trump, despite all the power that he does have, feels incredibly powerless. And understand, this sense of powerlessness this sense of inadequacy is something that he's carried since childhood. So consider that since childhood, decade after decade after decade after decade, he's continued to feel this sense of inadequacy. He's continued to feel this sense of not being up to par, which was also heightened by criticism that came from his father, and not being able to be up to par in that respect. So this compounds year after year after year after year in the form of energy blocks within, and it reaches an end point, even though we're not really at the end point, but it reaches a point where at 79 years old, Trump's as closed down, as negative, as miserable, as paranoid, as deficient, as unconscious of a human being as I've ever seen, as almost anyone's ever seen. Of course, he's probably not much more unconscious than Maga. Maga is probably not much more unconscious than him. They all suffer from the same levels of unconsciousness. That's simply what it is. See, the karma of Trump and MAGA is they have to suffer from all of those sentiments, all of those bad vibes that they attempt endlessly to manifest in the world, because that's what they're doing when MAGA makes the votes that it makes, when Trump tries to pass the laws that he passes and says the things that he says. It's just his way to express those dark, unbearable sentiments within. He doesn't know any better. He doesn't know how to feel open. He doesn't know how to feel loving. Trump and MAGA are cut off from life. Trump and MAGA are cut off from life force. Trump and MAGA are cut off from all that's good, all that's beautiful. Trump and MAGA could have all the beauty in the world just collide head on with them, and they would fail to see, understand, or be aware of any of it. They can't appreciate beauty. They can't appreciate love. They can't appreciate connectedness. So the nightmare that's within MAGA, the nightmares that's within Trump, they endlessly, helplessly as well, do their best to bring about that same nightmarish nature that's within them into the world. But they can only do so much of that. At the end of the day, the arc of history is always curved slightly toward good. Ultimately, when it comes down to anything that's dark and messed up in terms of how a person is acting, what they're saying, what they're doing, how they are, this all just represents fractured love. It's just love that's fractured. Love that's whole appears as such, holistic love. Anything that you don't like that someone is doing or saying is just an expression of fractured love. I'm not going to get too much into the whole idea of fractured love, but know that Trump and MAGA are doomed. They are doomed to be the bad guys of history. This is already the case now in terms of how they're seen, but with Trump being the presidency, this doesn't get spoken about in the mainstream as much as it will. It doesn't get acknowledged as such, but it will. MAGA will suddenly have to pretend like Trump never existed. Trump, if he manages to survive till the end of his term, is pretty much going to have to hide away because no one's going to want to hear from him, and Republicans are not going to be able to acknowledge him. But the Republicans that did acknowledge him, the Republicans that, I should say, accepted him and helped him get into a second term, they're not going to be forgiven, and it's not going to be forgotten what they said and did and the excuses they made for him. There's going to be a large segment of the population that are essentially treated like lepers, at least by the mainstream, at least by a large portion of society. And you think these politicians, you think these people in Trump's corner, you think these people that work in his administration, you think people that he associates with now are going to, you think they're going to be let off the hook by their kids, their grandkids, anyone who's supporting Trump, anyone who is in the Trump camp one way or another are making excuses for him, ultimately they'll have to pay the piper. They'll pay the piper in the forms of getting called out by the ones close to them, getting called out by, the media shows they happen to watch, hearing a conversation a table over when they're sitting to dine at a restaurant that's making fun of how Trump supporters, how dumb they were, how unaware they were, how they got played. And what's going to be especially frustrating for these Trump supporters is just how deeply, how significantly they've been fooled, and how someone who is largely seen as highly unintelligent, how they could be so effectively played by him. That's going to be a hard pill to swallow. And yes, there's going to be a large number of Trump supporters who go the rest of their lives playing the most, performing, I should say, the most intense, flexible type of mental gymnastics you've ever seen, just to avoid acknowledging the fact that they helped a fascist and, for all intents and purposes, a white nationalist Nazi get into the White House. And by doing so, they essentially were showcasing, presenting themselves to the world as fascist Nazis. And this isn't like the 1960s and 50s and 40s where white people would have the picnics and hang black people and do their barbecues, and there'd be pictures, of a black man hanging from a tree, and you have all these white, dark-eyed, evil-looking, demonic-looking white people standing around, this hung, deceased black person. It's not going to be like those photos, okay, where a lot of the people have passed away, or it's hard to figure out who was who doing what in what situation. No, this is all on camera. There are countless Trump supporters at the rallies, countless Trump supporters saying insane things. What do you think happens when the pendulum swings to the left? And trust me, it's going to swing with utmost brutality. Now, I'm saying all this because I'm not trying to come from a political place, but yes, this is political talk on some level. It's from a place of energy. This is a place of karma. What I'm expressing to you is how everything on a spiritual level moves toward the good. So when I talk about things penduluming over to the left, that's the universe regaining balance. That's what's happening. So it's a balancing act. So yeah, it seems dark, and Trump and Maga seem to be getting away with everything, but no, they're not getting away with everything. They're endlessly miserable. And a lot of these people suffer from issues such as, cardiovascular disease, have issues with their liver, have issues with their eyesight, have issues with their weight, have issues with anxiety. They have issues with anger. A lot of these Trump supporters have younger kids who are definitely not on the Trump train, and they get called out constantly by those kids, I'm sure. There'll be countless parents, countless aunts, countless uncles, countless grandparents who have been or will be disowned by their younger family members who were never on the Trump train, or were never going to get close to being on the Trump train. Their country, what they want the country to be, that's gone. It's never, ever, ever coming back. It'll never come back. And there's going to be consequences for the most flagrantly stupid and relentlessly oblivious in society, because, as I said, it's all on camera. It's all on camera. The one thing limiting the consequences, or limiting the reckoning, we should say, is simply the fact that Trump's in office. And a lot of that reckoning, it's going to manifest in the form of the 2026 elections, and then it's going to manifest significantly more in 2028. Trump and MAGA are swimming in karma because they're not what's cool anymore. And let's, keep it a buck. It's not that in terms of a majority of Americans, they were ever cool. They were just more accepted, and the voices were loud enough to create the illusion of being cool. But you even have people like Joe Rogan that get a sense that the vibes are shifting. This is simply the case. And Joe Rogan won't be able to escape his endorsement, won't be able to escape saying that he believes he's the reason that Donald Trump won. And personally, I do believe he's the reason that Donald Trump won. So he's never going to be able to live that down. The simple fact that, hey, I helped bring fascism, Nazism into America. Congrats, Joe Rogan. You think the left will ever let that go? You think liberals will ever let that go? Well, Joe Rogan, and this is Joe Rogan's karma, and I consider him a part of Maga. Joe Rogan's karma is he had what I consider such a flawless, I considered it flawless in terms of a reputation of open-mindedness, being willing to listen to the other side, and a willingness to have nuanced and interesting and different conversations. And plus, I believe he was a podcaster that helped usher in this new era of independent media, even though right now, as Kyle Kalinske would say, I would say he's more new corporate media than true independent media. But for a little bit, he really was independent media, and he was doing his thing. He had built such a strong reputation, and people like me and people who consider themselves much further on the left or liberals had a lot more respect for him. And he essentially blew it up for a guy that doesn't have probably even a quarter of his intelligence. And I'm not saying Joe Rogan's that smart. I mean, my assessment of his intelligence has plummeted a considerable degree considering all this BS with Trump in the run-up to the election and even after the election, and the unwillingness to just fully and completely call him out. Yes, I do question his level of intelligence, but even with that, his intelligence is considerably higher than Trump's, even on his worst day. That's just facts. But he blew up his reputation for a guy with barely a fraction of his intelligence. So, good job, Joe Rogan, but that's another example of a supporter, a part of MAGA, getting their karma. Me simply making this video, even though it may barely be seen by anybody, videos like Liz calling Joe Rogan out, who's a supporter of MAGA, is also part of his karma. Right now, more karma for Trump and MAGA is the fact that the left and liberals, that's the trendy thing now. That's what's in now. That cannot be denied now. You see these protests, you see where it's going. Democratic socialism is on its way in. Obviously, we see the situation with Mamdani, so you get the craziness that materialized on the right, and now you're going to get something to help counterbalance that craziness on the right with what's necessary and powerful and more selfless on the left. See, I'm not going to refer to it as the fringe left. It's Mamdani and the democratic socialists that are coming are representative of the universe's counterbalancing mechanism for all the damage done by the craziness that's unfolded on the right. It's all about counterbalancing. It's all about a correction, because that's what the universe is always doing. It's bringing things back into balance. It's bringing things closer to love. Trump and MAGA have a severe inability to express love and to feel love. And as cheesy as it might sound, that's all they want. That's what everybody wants. The karma is they will continue to suffer from an inability to express love and to feel love. They never, ever, Trump or MAGA never, ever, ever got close to any semblance of satisfaction or deep joy from anything that they've done that they've managed to get done over the last decade, from any damage that they caused, from any of the immigrants that they've managed to get out of the country. Because we have a lot of immigrants in the country. We still have a lot of immigrants coming into the country. We'll have a lot more come into the country. And then more karma for Trump, from Trump and MAGA, is what the country is going to become after Trump is out of office. Things are really going to move to the left. It's going to be more of the opposite of what Trump would want, of what MAGA would want. And it must suck. It's going to suck to have once been the most powerful man in the world. Obviously, I'm talking about Trump. And to be the most reviled man in the world to such an extent where all the Republicans that had ever supported you won't even mention your motherfucking name. And that's just karma. See, this karma shit, man, this is no joke. It's relentless. Okay? No matter where Trump goes, there he is. No matter where Trump's supporters, where MAGA goes, there they are. The nightmare they work so hard to bring into the world is a nightmare they themselves can never escape. Trump lives in a nightmare of his own making. MAGA lives in a nightmare of their own making. For the people on the left, for the Democrats, for the liberals, whatever displeasure, dissatisfaction, and frustration they're dealing with when it comes to Trump, when it comes to MAGA, I assure you, it's nothing close. It's nothing close to what Trump and MAGA have to experience themselves. Because unlike the people on the left, unlike leftists, unlike liberals, unlike Democrats, there's just far less of an ability to feel anything good. And you know this because they're unable to emanate, to manifest, to project anything good. You cannot bring good into the world if it doesn't exist in you. Period. It's not something you could fake. Actual good into the world, that type of thing comes from people who have good in them. So Trump and MAGA have to deal with the curse of being perpetually disconnected from life force, from spirit, from their highest selves, from God. And they don't know that they don't know, but at the same time, I am certain Trump and MAGA intuit that something is very wrong.